Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for coming along to the Transport Committee, and we're also online on YouTube, so welcome to all our people who are online. Can I start, please, by asking Laura for any apologies, please?
Chairman, we've received apologies for absence from Assembly Member Bailey, Assembly Member Eshlomi and Assembly Member O'Connell, Assembly Member Boff, Assembly Member Devenish and Assembly Member Sahota are attending as substitutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so our main topic today will be motorcycle safety, and I'd like to welcome our guests. And also, could I ask that everybody checks that their electronic devices are switched off, please, or at least put onto silent. So I'd like to first of all welcome our guests. I'll start with Anna Z. Welcome, thank you very much. She's the Director of Political and Technical Services for the British Motorcycle Federation. Correct? Thank you. I'm reading it on the label. Carey-Clinch.
Morning.
Good morning. And you are the Policy Advisor for Motorcycle Industry Association. Caroline Hazlehurst just slipped in there on time. Director of Operations for Deliveroo. So just about delivered on time. And Philip Marshall, who's the co-founder of WeRide London. So welcome everybody. I think it's going to be a very interesting debate. But it's also very important because we know that there are serious issues around motorcycle safety in London. So I'm going to kick off. And this is to all our guests. The number of motorcyclists... Sorry? Oh, I do beg your pardon. There's a slight technicality. I have to ask if all the members present have declared or have any interest to declare. Don't at all. No? Other than those that have already declared on the business have to declare it on. Right, so motorcycle casualties. So this is questions to all members. The number of motorcyclists killed or seriously injured in London has increased 29% in the past 2 years. Would you like to offer your reasons why? Should I start with Anna? You kick off
now? On the stats that I think the increase in serious injuries shown in the statistics is more apparent than real. Because of the way the difference in reporting now, and the crash system, the COPA system, serious injuries, it's known, is showing differences of up to 5 to 15% across the country. I did some work on this because I actually met somebody who was the author of the original feasibility study for crash. And she told me that the thing is that because the slight and serious injuries have been effectively reclassified to some extent, because if you have a certain percentage being reclassified, there's a lot more slight injuries, and if you take, in this case, I've calculated this with 4% of those, and 4% of the serious injuries, and you reclassify them, then it brings you back to a figure. What I did was to actually adjust the 2016 figures by 4%.
Right.
So reverse engineering it back to how it might have been last year. And then I also multiplied it, added another 3%, because that was the overall drop in casualties. And so multiplied it up a bit. My resultant figures were for slight injuries, rather than the 4,574, which were reported this year, for 2016 rather, that came out to 4,873, which is very close to the 4,894 for 2015. And in serious injuries, it was 506 as opposed to 504. So up slightly, but probably not significant. Now, I'm not a statistician. This isn't, but this is basically on the methodology that was suggested to me by Heather Ward. That is why I'm saying these figures are more apparent than real. and actually serious injuries were probably being underreported in previous years.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. First of all, before I say anything, can I welcome Lilli Matson,
Apologies for
Director of
not being
Transport
here.
Strategy, TfL.
Thank you.
Came on overground, obviously. Right, so what you're saying is basically the stats that are claiming there's been a 29% increase in the last 2 years are a statistical bent rather than a reality.
Yes, it's basically a function of the change in classification of injuries.
Recording process, yeah, okay.
Could I come in here, Chair?
Yeah, just on that, yeah.
I completely agree. There has been a total change in the way that these figures are recorded. But what it is telling us is that serious injuries were being underreported in the past.
Absolutely.
So while it isn't a significant change, what it is that we didn't understand how many serious injuries there were in the past, and now we do. So we do have a bigger problem than we used to understand that we had. The point is that it hasn't just changed, it has been worse than we thought for much longer than we thought.
Yes.
So it's not that we still need to be worried about these
We
levels
do still need to be worried.
of
Yeah.
casualties.
But it isn't, there isn't a significant change this year as opposed, for 2016 as opposed to 2015.
Yeah,
That's
but
I'm
all
saying,
years
yes.
are worse
But
than
And
we
it's always
understood.
been
Yes.
bad, yeah,
Yeah.
okay, that's an important point actually. Craig, coming next.
Yes, I mean, firstly, I think the point you just made, Caroline, is extremely important. We can't sort of suddenly say, well, everything's all right then. Actually, we've got a better understanding of the way serious injuries are being recorded. The main point is when it comes to developing a history from here on, we're only in year one, so it sort of skews what we knew before. I mean, what we do know about deaths and serious injuries, if you look at the 2012 to 16 period, is that deaths fell by 2.2%, KSIs 8.27. So I suppose if you were to extrapolate backwards, like reverse engineer the serious injuries all the way back to 2012, you'd probably find there wouldn't be a huge change. So we've still got that problem of not tackling serious injuries. During that period of time, the market went up in London, the new motorcycle market, to-wheel market went up by 18.1%. Now, what's slightly worrying is if you look at the national picture, minus London, during that period, fatals fell by 5%, but the overall market went up 40%. What we're seeing is KSIs more or less, or the serious injuries more or less mirroring what's going on in London. The point being, what we're seeing outside London is that there's more people buying powered two-wheelers, fewer people getting killed. Certainly serious injuries need attention. Now, the main difference, of course, is that outside London, several local authorities do incorporate motorcycles as part of their overall transport planning, particularly Northamptonshire, and measures and investment are put in place to reduce rider vulnerability. So that's an area we feel the MCS should focus on as it moves forward, to continue what it's doing on safety, with brilliant actions, especially the launch the other week at the city of the accreditation schemes. But the one missing element from the MCS is motorcycles recognised as a form of transport and investment in safety unlocked accordingly.
Oh, thank you. Caroline.
So Deliveroo have 4,000 riders on the road in London, 50% of which are motorcyclists. And what we're hearing from survey data, the feedback that we have from our riders from a safety perspective, is the reasons for those accidents cited are things like aggressive driving of motorists, not enough space on the road, so the need for sharing bus lanes, for example, poor weather conditions, poor street lighting in the suburbs. But the overarching number one priority that we're getting from our riders is they think that road surfaces need more investment. Potholes and badly tarmac roads are cited as one of the primary reasons for accidents occurring in London.
Thank you.
I think that's particularly true of smaller bikes. Bigger bikes less so, but our feeling is we'd like a statistic to know how much fault, where the fault lies, whether it's rider safety, rider ability, or whether it's drivers and other road users. I think would be quite an interesting statistic, but we definitely are in favour of using all the bus lanes. Statistics are pretty clear on the safety being, I think it's 40% safer, I think, if you use bus lanes. So we think there should be a big priority on that. Also, one thing we've talked about a lot is whether to use the a little bit the outer third of the bicycle box at the front of lights, so people are seen coming off, because there's quite a lot of crashing there. And also it would actually make it safer for cyclists, because you'd have the faster bike getting away first. We think there's quite a few small changes that could make a big difference. Road surface is definitely high on our list as well.
Thank you. Lilli, the question was the number of motorcyclists killed or seriously injured in London has increased 29% in the past 2 years. Why? The evidence we are getting suggests that actually it's not an increase, but the previous data that was collected was in deficit. So we think it's as bad now as it's been for some time, which in a way is worse, actually, I think. Do you have any comments on
Yes.
that? Yeah, lovely.
Thank you. Good morning. Apologies, I wasn't here at the start of your session. All really valid points that are made here. The most important thing I think I can say about casualties for riding motorcyclists in London is that whereas we have seen a downward trend in almost every other road user, the trajectory for motorcyclists has been much more stubborn in coming down. So we can sort of say it, little quibbles here or there about the exact thing, but the point is it hasn't been coming down at the rate that we've seen for cyclists, or the rate we've seen for pedestrians, the rate we've seen in particular for car occupants. So we know that this is our number one vulnerable road casualty priority, and that's why it stands out. It's given its own section within the draft MTS. If we do, just to recap on some of the figures, and indeed to pick up your point about who is having those collisions and the level of experience. The fatal collisions did come down in 2016, in 2016. But we're looking at year to date, and I'm not sure in this year that they're going to be below. They are currently below 2016 figures, but we know that these winter months are particularly dangerous. So I'm not complacent on that, I think, in terms of fatals.
Sorry, whereabouts are we on that?
So the figures that I have here is that year to date, there have been 27 fatal collisions involving
and what was the figure last year?
And at this time last year, it was 24. So although we may have a good autumn, the trends are not where we want them to be. Right. In terms of KSIs, people being seriously injured as well as killed, there was this increase. It does reflect reporting changes. But nevertheless, and when we do the backcasting, we think we still will see a downward trend from our baseline, which is in the 2005-2009 period. But it's just not coming down at the rate. We have a Vision Zero ambition set out in our MTS. So we need to totally change the trajectory of that curve if we are actually going to go anywhere near that. And this is the group that, if I'm honest, we find it most difficult to know exactly how to target, and I'll touch on in my answers hopefully to you how we aim to target that, but it hasn't been following the trajectory we want. Just in terms of picking up Philip's point, one thing I would note, and which really shocked me, is that in the last 30 months, from the information that we've had from the Metropolitan Police, they attribute 14% of motorcycle fatalities to what they call bike life type activity. Now, it's a phenomenon in terms of groups of bikers getting together to perform stunts and high-speed activities or riding out in mass groups. There was some concern that there might be activity around Halloween on this in terms of mass gatherings, and I think that MPS put together some initiative to control that. But that's a huge number if you talk about 14% of the fatalities in the last 30 months. So there's a particular type of activity, and that is not to say to take away from just normal, tragic, other kinds of collisions that happen. But I think we need to identify that that's one issue. In terms of where and how motorcycle collisions occur, we're looking, these aren't primarily the larger bikes. We're saying around 80% of the casualties are on 125 cc's or less. But inexperience is a key factor. 19% of the riders killed had less than 1 year's riding experience. And that's why in all of our activities, we're focusing, where we can get an access to this is through training. And that's why just recently we've been launching these training initiatives. So I can come back to other...
do you have the stats on old boys like me returning to cycling? I think that's a problem as well, isn't it?
It can be, in terms of the use of larger bikes. We know that loss of control is a very large factor in terms of fatalities. But we know that the older age group is much more willing and happy to come along to some of the training courses we run like Bike Safe. That isn't at all attractive to younger and inexperienced drivers. So we need to find other ways of accessing that market.
Okay, thank you.
Could I ask one question? Do you have the statistics on whether it was the rider's fault or the other person, the driver, for ones that were collisions?
So I think it's 50%, and I'll look through here, of collisions involved a right hook turn by another vehicle. Mm-hmm. So whether you say that's entirely the driver of that vehicle's fault, or was the motorcycle driver perhaps coming too fast up the offside, or the outside lane, it doesn't do so. We have produced and published a very detailed, what we call fatality study, which was undertaken by TRL, who's a good consultancy on this, who went into depth into all the fatal records, and that kind of information is available in there. It's very seldom that you can say it's just one person's fault.
Well, yeah.
Sorry, Anne.
I think you mentioned loss of control, but an inexperienced rider certainly is that much more likely to reach, find themselves in a situation where they haven't got the experience, they do lose control. But motorcyclists don't normally lose control just like that. There's usually some proximate cause. And I realise this is very difficult, but we have very little information about why a rider has lost control. It's not, I mean, some of the time, yes, it may be approaching a particular point too fast, so they haven't they haven't got the time to take avoiding action. But some of the time, it can be other things like road conditions and so on, and we don't have. We don't really have enough information on that. Though it's obviously very difficult because whoever is actually filling in the stats 19 or whatever may not be aware of what could have caused the problem in the first place.
Craig, did you want to just quickly come in?
Yes, some very good facts and figures there from Lilli, actually, some of them very interesting. I'm interested in your focus on the bike life people because, we've all watched some of that stuff and it's really quite worrying. It's one of those areas where do we know enough about how to engage this group? And there's the issue of engagement as opposed to influencing. The two are very different things, and anything TfL can do to try and understand that matter better will be of interest. But in terms of the group being stubborn, power two-wheeler casualties, well, I think one only has to compare the relative investment between cycling and motorcycling and pedestrians. The allocated specific funds for motorcycle safety are lower than they ought to be, and I hope that can be addressed under the MCS.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're going to go into that in the next section, actually. So that's helpful. Thank you very much. So if we move on now, Caroline.
Yeah, I want to pick up with you, Lilli, about the Motorcycle Safety Action Plan.
Yeah.
Is it still in effect? It came in early 2014, and what progress has TfL made against the many actions in it, including Operation Safeway every month, safety campaigns, 40% uplift in the METS motorcycle tasking team, etc.?
Yes. So, indeed, and we're quite happy to, I don't know if we have in advance of this, but provide you a written update on all the actions. All actions are on track to be delivered. There are two actions which we don't think will be delivered, and I'll explain to you why they are. Yes, it was an action plan. We are doing the actions in it because we know that they are targeted, as to the best of our knowledge, at the kinds of causes of these kind of collisions. And that includes the motorcycle tasking team. That includes investing in Bike Safe every year. That includes producing the Urban Motorcycle Handbook. There was two actions around advanced technology on motorcycles themselves, which we are actually going to be looking to, hopefully, the manufacturers themselves to take forward, because it's not actually very relevant for TfL to be innovating motorcycle technology. And the second, there was 2 actions related to that, and the third one was on a renewed fatality study of motorcycle collisions. We have been tracking the recent causes since we completed the last fatality study, and actually there doesn't seem to be any new or emerging trends or causes. So the problems that we've been talking about in terms of right hooks, loss of control, speed, causal factors like road surfaces are all exactly the same. So actually it doesn't seem this is quite the right time to do another in-depth study of fatalities. Beyond that, all other actions are on track to be completed this year.
Okay, lovely. And appreciate getting that detail from you after the meeting. Are there any plans to update the action plan in light of what's in the Mayor's draft transport strategy and ultimately will be in his final?
So I think we're open to discussion with you, and I'd like to see what your report says. At the moment, and I think this is really important to recognise, the draft MTS moves beyond where we were with the Road Safety Action Plan, in that it sets out a Vision Zero approach, and this is about reducing the risk to all road users, so with the aim of bringing fatalities on London's roads to zero by 2041. And that means taking a more holistic and integrated approach, which is characterised by our Healthy Streets approach. That's why we have a global investment programme on that, which is over 2 billion in investment, and that includes safety as a core component of that for our most vulnerable road users. So that is motorcyclists, pedestrians, cyclists. There isn't separate pots for each of these. We are trying to make the roads safer by removing the risk. Part of that will be measures which reduce risk for all road users, such as lower speed limits, such as different treatments of the road surfacing to make it aware that you are in a shared environment, or environment where you're more likely to have interaction with other road users. And therefore, in that context, we have been moving away from having bespoke and sort of targeted, if you like, action plans for each road user, because we're talking about the street environment and its collective whole. But I'm quite interested also to see what your assembly finds, and I am open to talking about that.
Okay, well, I think we felt it was very useful you having that dedicated plan and very clear actions for this group, very vulnerable group, as you said at the start. We all think of cyclists and pedestrians, but motorcyclists are up there, and the numbers, as you say, aren't going in the right direction. You said there's a global budget, so that you still haven't got a dedicated budget for motorcycle safety?
We don't have a dedicated budget for any one road user. There's not like this is a pedestrian safety budget, this is a cyclist safety budget. There is, we have, and I think you'll have discussed as a committee, investment within our 2016 business plan on the Healthy Streets investment portfolio, which covers all works to and improvements to the road network, with a focus on improving the reliability of the network for buses, access by pedestrians, cyclists, and safety as a generic whole. And that covers, we're targeting that at the most vulnerable locations, or locations where people are vulnerable, and the most vulnerable road groups. So within that, that's where the safety money sits. There are specific sums that we spend every year, such as supporting or funding the Bike Safe programme, or funding the motorcycle tasking team, but they all sit within this global budget. And we don't account line by line for this scheme is only about cycle safety, and therefore we'll put X pounds beside that. It's not. When we do a scheme, it should reduce the road risk for all the vulnerable road users in that area.
Okay, so the Healthy Streets budget, how much is it?
So from top of memory, I think in the 2016 business plan, it's about £2 billion investment in that, but we can confirm that.
Over
the 5-year period of that business plan, but obviously we are in the process of revising the business plan as well. But let me confirm in writing exactly.
Okay, so the Healthy Streets budget, which I kind of thought was cycling and walking, covers buses, covers motorcycles, covers every aspect of investment in roads.
It's about streets, yeah. So it covers the improvements to the street environment to deliver the kinds of outcomes we want. Safer streets, more reliable streets for buses, the investments required to create a modal shift to walking and cycling, and safety as a core component. So it has a number of different outcomes that we would expect from schemes funded through that investment portfolio.
Thank you.
And that was a bringing together of disparate funding streams within TfL. That's how it was created.
Look, and you'll be able to share with us, will you, the proportion of that that's actually spent specifically on motorcycle safety?
No, because I just said that within a scheme we don't account pound for pound. This piece of tarmac is specifically about motorcycle safety vis-a-vis pedestrian safety or car driver safety. When we are reconfiguring streets, we're trying to improve the safety outcome for all of those users. There are specific sums, as I mentioned, for issues like the bike safe, and I'm happy to share that information with you.
I think that will
but within, it is really important to understand, within the Healthy Streets investment, we are trying to achieve a number of different objectives and with an overall emphasis on safety.
And when you do this Healthy Streets business, say you amend a junction or whatever, do you monitor if there's been an improvement?
Yes.
So would you be able to give us some examples of where you've done some work and there's been a notable improvement in fewer casualties or whatever?
Yes, yes, absolutely. All of our schemes are monitored for that, and we encourage all of the boroughs, who obviously manage 95% of the road network, to use. We have something called the Traffic Accident Diary System, or TADS, and for a number of years we've been recording the 3 years before and 3 years after monitoring survey data. As a very general rule, we normally see around 20% reduction in KSIs from engineering type schemes, but we can give you more recent examples if that's helpful.
Just before I call in Assemblyman Devonish, do you ever get any that go the other way? I'd need to. So there, I'd need to look at the data. If we do that, there's as part of the process of designing schemes, there's a road safety audit. And as part of the final stages of that, if there was to be immediately after the implementation scheme, you were to be noticing that the junction or whatever wasn't operating as you thought it was, you go in and take mitigating action. But generally, no. I don't want to sort of promise you it's never been the case. But the point is we monitor it to take action if that hasn't delivered the outcome that we want. Okay, thank you. Devonish.
I just wanted to ask if you've got any NHS data figures in terms of the cost to A&E of the serious injuries of motorcyclists, and could we basically say, would it be right to say that we probably spend hundreds of millions in NHS budget to fix people when they've been injured, while only spending single-digit millions in sorting out TfL budgets so the roads are safer? So
I can't right here give you those figures, but there is using the Department of Transport's own agreed cost of a life lost or cost of a serious injury, you could easily calculate by the number of serious injuries or fatalities what the cost to society and to London is from these tragic collisions taking place. So yes, we do also collect hospital episode data as well, which would suggest that, I think as one of the speakers was saying, the overall level of collisions is higher than is actually reported in the Stats 19. So this is a very large cost to society.
So can anybody here give us some figures after the meeting, so perhaps we could lobby the Mayor on that? Because if it is as simple as hundreds of millions of pounds NHS budget, £1 million
we'll do that
our
as part
budget.
Of the investigation, and will be around the recommendations, I'm sure. Yeah, thank you. Right, thank you very much. Councillor Assemblyman Bashar.
Thank you, Chair. My question to start with is to Lilli. The Mayor has proposed in his draft transport strategy London standard for motorcycle training. Can you tell us what is different about it, and also how would TfL ensure that participant that there's good take-up by the riders?
Thank you for that question. So the London standard and the new approach to training was launched by the Deputy Mayor about a week or two ago. And what is new about it is, so we obviously don't have any ability to compel motorcyclists to take up training. Therefore, we have to understand the barriers that might prevent them doing that. And from the research that we've undertaken to date, things like cost is one, or lack of information, or it's not for me type fit is often cited as a reason for not taking it. So we specifically designed 3 different new courses which aim to address those barriers. The first is specifically aimed at younger and experienced drivers, and it's about preparing for your CBT or your compulsory basic test. And it's a short e-learning course, and it's aimed at young drivers. And we are going to be promoting that through the people who train people for their CBT. So we are working with accredited trainers. We've been working with the MCIA on accreditation of trainers and getting them to push out that type of course. There's another course which is the one-to-one motorcycle skills. It's a more 2-hour tailored session, perhaps, Keith, more for your type of experienced motorcyclist and for commuters. And we're really we know that a lot of these very serious collisions are during the commute. So we really want to work with that audience. And we'll be pushing this through insurance companies, through the people who actually sell motorcycles themselves to make sure that people know when they're purchasing a motorbike that these kind of courses are available, and through London boroughs to make sure that they are advertising it. And there's a final course which is called Beyond the Compulsory Basic Training, which is working with delivery riders. So we've been engaging with companies such as Deliveroo, such as Pizza Hut, and other companies of that, to try to develop bespoke courses that are specifically relevant to delivery drivers who have so many vehicle miles in the year. And so that's what's new. They're all new. And they are specifically targeted to address the barriers that we know exist to why people don't do training.
Is this, in a sense, time limited, or what monitoring regime you will have, and is there any cost to the participants themselves?
Let me just, so some of the Bike Safe is one that is, that's it, these are in addition to Bike Safe, and that is a paid for course, although it can have a subsidised cost to it. And
it's only £40.
It's £45, and many are discounted at 25. And obviously the e-ride, e-learning ones and things like that, they are free courses.
Yeah. Caroline, do you want to come in, and then Philip, you might want to, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, so we've supported this range of initiatives, and we think they can make a real difference to motorcycle safety on the road. So we think they're great steps forward. Within Deliveroo itself, we're a big fleet operator now in London, and as the company grows, our own internal processes are changing. This year we've worked with companies like AA Drive Tech, the largest provider of fleet risk management and driver education services, in order to review and update our safety and onboarding processes. We've done a similar exercise with Brake, the road safety charity. What I would say is we're very supportive of what FORS is doing. However, as you know, this is set up to work for employed fleets. And therefore, with our current self-employed model, it's incompatible. We can't mandate that our riders take these training courses. So the one thing that I would like to add is we're very keen to continue talks with TfL on FORS and ideally adapt it or find a way to have it work for self-employed fleets. We think that this could be something that we could then use to update our online training materials and that we could use during onboarding.
Anna, if I can ask you, what are the barriers you reckon to take up for training that is currently available, and anything that you heard from Lilli and Caroline that you might want to comment upon?
The BMF has welcomed the introduction of these training courses. We regard it as a valuable initiative. The difficulty will be in actually encouraging the take-up. a lot of the people, a lot of the riders that we actually need to take part in this are not, unfortunately, members of, very, very rarely members of the BMF or MAG or WeRide London or whoever. So it's not trying to access them through what we would regard as motorcycling channels is not necessarily going to be effective. I saw that TfL had advertised the courses in Metro, which I think is good. Maybe could use local radio as well. And in something like Metro, obviously that's people who are actually using public transport who usually read it, but at least if it's in there, maybe the wives, the girlfriends and other friends will see it and maybe encourage their friends if they know they're riding a bike to encourage them to take it up. It seems like an excellent initiative. As I say, the hard part is going to be actually trying to get the message through to people and getting them to actually take the training.
Can I just add? I think there's a role for national government here as well. I think from our point of view, we're trying to raise educational standards way above what's actually required by national legislation. And we've been lobbying the government to improve the requirements and the quality of the training for the CBT. It's something that we've joined with MCIA to try to have accreditation for trainers and to raise those standards. The DFT did do a consultation on improving motorcycle training about a year ago, but we haven't heard anything since. If it's harder to get your CBT, if the barrier is a bit higher, if you feel that it's worth engaging in this training to get that valuable thing that you want, which is your ability to jump on the bike, then we've got more levers to get people to do this training. And so the government needs to raise the bar and make it actually worth people looking at these courses and taking their safety seriously. And we really need the government support on that.
Point, I think there was a lot of talk about making the tests harder, the standard tests. But the interesting thing was it was about making the part 2 and part 3 harder and not really about the CBT. I know Mike, who's usually here, on his CBT 4 years ago, 5 years ago, somebody crashed into a wall and still passed. And it's not the first time I've heard those sort of stories. The CBT really needs improving and needs to actually give a bit more safety. Also the driver safety of other vehicles. They're taught a lot about pedestrians and they're taught a lot about cyclists, but not that much about bicycles. And I think that could be improved.
Yeah, just to reflect some of the things here. I mean, the barriers are the same in London as just about anywhere else. There's people with a lack of time, money, it's engaged in this whole thing. There are language barriers, for example. But a key thing which TfL is addressing very heavily, I think, along with us, is what faces you when you go for your CBT. If you've got that quality in place, if the standard of instruction is good, if the training school itself has a professional air about it, that you're getting value for your money, then you're more likely to engage that particular process. Beyond the CBT, of course, we need to look to government to offer incentives to take the actual test, but at this point in time, let's get the CBT right, and strongly welcome the work that TfL is doing here.
The DFSA has recently taken steps to try and ensure the quality of the CBT. I don't think that's been in place very long, so we may not be seeing much benefit from it yet. But certainly they have been taking those steps. Good. And hopefully we'll see some real results.
Just quickly to interject on that one, the MCIAC, the Motorcycle Industry Accreditation Centre, has now been formally recognised and supported by DVSA, so that means we can really roll out MCIAC really much as been pioneered with TfL, so we can make that more of a national thing. That can only impact positively on how people view taking training, getting into the CBT, entering the system as a whole.
Lilli, have you or have TfL got any targets set up for the London standard which is being promoted?
In terms of participation, yes, we do. So for first year. It's 400 to participate in the Preparing for Your CBT course. For the one-to-one motorcycle skills, it's 500 riders. For the Beyond CPT, it's 250 riders. And that's on top of the Bike Safe London course, which we run, which is circa 1,500, 1,600 riders every year.
Do you think that's ambitious enough? Craig, or
So are you asking me?
well,
No.
yes, you can.
I mean, it's the
or
first
do you have
year.
plans to
Yeah.
go higher?
We
than
would
that?
we'd love to go higher. I think we need to understand, it's about addressing these barriers and understanding what works. If we are getting a lot of take-up, then that's good, and we will promote it and raise our targets. But any help that the industry, that representative groups can give, we can bust those targets.
We can use our social media to try and to get the message out there. Say if it's some of the target groups are not as likely necessarily to access our social media, but with a bit of luck, some of them will. But we will try.
Saying that, I think the anti-acid attack groups and the anti-bike theft groups are a lot of less experienced riders are really involved in those.
Yeah.
So they'd be,
good,
and I'm sure they'd be very keen. We can get in
That's a
touch.
brilliant idea.
In the same way that the whole push on cycling safety was generated by user concerns about safety and other aspects, one would hope we can channel a lot of the stuff that's been going on over the last year into more interest in what we can do to engage other people. There's still work and research to be done. It's engaging what are sometimes very hard to reach groups. We're still going to do more work on it, and we'll support TfL any way we can to achieve that.
And from our perspective, we have 50 full-time members of staff across the UK who help with safety issues. These are people who are responsible for our safety and onboarding programs, and they coordinate local rider engagement events where riders can raise safety concerns, and our safety staff can offer advice. That's a channel that we can use to ensure that some of these initiatives are pushed to our riders in an engaging way. We have other means as well, social media. We have a rider microsite, which includes safety aspects as well as things like partnerships and that sort of thing. So there's a fair amount that we can do on our side as well to support some of these initiatives.
Thank you.
We've got a couple of members who'd like to come in on this. Caroline, Russell.
Yes, for Deliveroo, you're finding it difficult to get people, well, everyone's finding it difficult to get people to take up training, particularly sort of younger people. Those are the kind of people who may well be riding for Deliveroo. Have you thought about refusing to let people work for you unless they've done basic training?
We do. So as part of the onboarding process, you have to do an online training video, and we require that motorcycles have done their CBT. So we don't onboard riders unless they have done that basic training. The other thing I would say is about our kit policy. So we require that riders have a helmet, lights, a reflective jacket, and a small and a large food delivery bag or box, which has to have some reflective element to it as well. And we don't onboard riders unless they have done the training and have that kit.
Can you comment on, I've heard Deliveroo riders tell me that they've been encouraged to move to a power two-wheeler rather than using a bicycle. Do you have, is this just their perception, or do you prefer people to be using power two-wheelers rather than bicycles for deliveries? Because it seems with electric bicycles especially, there's no reason why Deliveroo drivers need to use a power two-wheeler at all.
That's correct. There's no real reason why a rider should use a motorcycle over a bike. From our perspective, as I said, we're 50-50 in London, bicycles versus motorcycles. We are not offering that scheme in order to encourage riders to switch. From our perspective, it's more about how riders engage with the work that we offer them. So cyclists are less likely to be able to do as many hours or as many deliveries with us, whereas motorcyclists can work for longer. Or
why is that? I used to be a bicycle dispatch rider, so I used to work long hours, did 8 hours a day of cycling all over London. I don't understand why cyclists can do fewer hours, and if motorcyclists are doing more hours than people who are riding bikes, then that seems worrying from a safety perspective.
They might be doing more hours than a bike, but the first thing I'd start with is saying I think there are very few people who can cycle for 8 hours a day. It is grueling and it's hard to cycle around for that long. So the reason that we offer that scheme is it's the choice for a rider who may want to upgrade their vehicle if they do find it hard to cycle around for that long. That's really all it is.
Just from the point of view of the health of the people who are doing it, it's healthier to cycle. From the point of view of air pollution in London, if deliveries are being made on vehicles that are potentially more dangerous and that also cause pollution, that just seems worrying. It would just seem that from a safety point of view, for Deliveroo to be encouraging as many people not to be using powered two-wheelers and to be on bicycles would actually, potentially increase safety.
The thing about the bicycle versus scooter vehicle mixes, although we do have this one scheme that allows riders to move over from being on a bicycle to being a scooter, actually the barrier to getting on the road with a bicycle is far lower. So what we have seen over time is the percentage of our fleet that is bicycle versus scooter has increased over time in favour of bicycles. This time last year we were closer to 70% scooter rider. So as I say, that scheme is optional for riders. I wouldn't say that we're actively pushing it or encouraging it. It's one of a suite of things that we offer our riders to give them the choice. But what I would expect is that over the coming months and years that fleet mix is likely to continue shifting towards bicycles, as I said, because of the barrier to getting on the road and because of the type of work that it is. It's flexible work. Our average hours for riders are 15 hours a week. The investment that is required in buying a scooter, paying for petrol, paying for insurance is far higher for a scooter. So I think it's likely that actually you'll see that shift going the other way towards bicycles, continuing towards bicycles.
Yeah. And do you have, or does TfL have any figures on the difference of the number of delivery riders involved in collisions, whether they're on scooters or on bicycles?
That's not recorded on the Stats 19 form. So we don't know that specifically in relation to delivery riders, but we do know in relation to overall statistics that the rate of collisions per kilometre is higher on a motorcycle than it is on a bike.
Thank you.
Can I address one small point there? Motorcycles and scooters are less than 1% of pollution in London because they are more polluting than bicycles and obviously don't keep you as fit, but it is a minor figure of pollution in London.
Frank, you want to come in?
Yeah, I think this is one of these areas where you've got a balance of cost and benefits. We can look at it in terms of bicycles versus powered two-wheelers, but we can also look at it as the Mayor has done quite interestingly in the draft strategy of how we can look at the use of powered two-wheelers to shift freight from more polluting transport modes downwards, but over towards powered two-wheeler usage. Now, somebody who's been properly trained, has a correct corporate background, has a series of standards applied to it as Deliveroo seem to be doing and the TfL are encouraging, there is no particular reason why the risk of accident or injury is going to be significantly greater than that of a cyclist. As we can see, a lot of the problems we have with powered two-wheeler safety and vulnerability can be addressed by good framework to get people engaged in safety. But for that particular person, when it comes to a business benefit to both themselves and also the companies they work for, they can work greater hours. Powered two-wheelers are much more flexible when it comes to the types of freight that they can deliver. There's less rushing around going on. And also you've got that potential to look at light van deliveries and how much of that could be switched to powered two-wheeler usage, which I know the Mayor is very interested in looking at as part of the MTS. So I think it's one of these things where everything has a cost benefit. We can evolve transport and manage transport in different and more creative ways rather than just looking at single paradigms. In the longer term, of course, decarbonisation agenda is very much on us. As we move towards the 2040 targets, 2035 targets in some case for the Mayor, if we look at developments within the industry, we're going to be looking at within a short time frame of an increase in the number of zero pollution powered two-wheelers as well as electric bicycles with a better range. So, you know, let's look at it in the round. Again, it's one of those areas where does powered two-wheelers play a part when it comes to the overall strategy as a whole, and on deliveries there could be a significant role.
Okay.
Can I just add one thing?
Can I just one thing? Do you want to come in?
I wanted to ask if anybody in the insurance industry was working with you to try and push training by reducing premiums.
Not that we're aware of, I think.
Yeah, I mean, insurance companies will take account of safety and training within premiums, and the discounts are often offered for things like IAM or ROSPA. But in terms of a formalised structure, you know, we do talk to the insurance companies, but initiatives that we're currently pursuing are generally outside of those discussions.
I think Craig's right, that insurance companies will give discounts for certain training, but this is usually for advanced training. IAM, ROSPA, for BMS Blue Ribbon, various advanced riding courses. One of the problems with overtake-up of a proper motorcycle test, apart from just the CBT, is that although I am told that the insurance premium should be less for if you have a full licence than if you just have your CBT, as far as I can make out, the difference is not enough to provide an incentive for people to actually take a full motorcycle test.
Thank you.
But that's a slightly different issue.
Sorry, Philip, did you want to come in on?
Yeah, there was mention of zero emissions, and it's just a note maybe for future talk, not for now, but zero emissions motorcycles and scooters particularly. My feeling is that there needs to be some future provision for this because they're incredibly fast. The equivalent of a 125 in an electric motorbike is like an R1 up to 70. It's incredibly quick, or probably an R6. It's like a sports bike, a real serious sports bike. I tested one recently. And that's something that a 17-year-old with a CBT can get on. So just a note, as a side note,
good point. Thank you.
It needs thinking about.
Can I quickly return on this, because it's actually quite an important point. We did a bit of work recently to look at electric bicycles in particular and to whether they actually comply with legal frameworks. Now, a 125cc licensed category electric bicycle is actually a motorcycle, is a powered two-wheeler, and they are restricted in legislation to top speed and power. One of the things which I need to find the reference, the electric standard offers which TfL were looking at, I'll need to write to you about that. I mentioned in our response to the transport strategy, that is anything that the Transport for London does in terms of incentivising the EPTW market has to state quite clearly what the rules are, particularly when it comes to electric bicycles themselves. We're currently at the sort of stage where we've settled the regulations in government to make sure that EPTWs and e-bikes are actually compliant with bicycle regulations vis-a-vis motorcycle regulations, but I'm not sure that necessarily the marketplace is fully aware. So when it comes to any incentivisation of electric bicycles in particular, it needs to be made clear what an electric bicycle actually is.
That's a good point. Thank you very much. It's very helpful. All right, we can move on now. Go to Assemblyman McCartney.
So my question's starting with Lilli, if I can. It's about accreditation of courier firms. We noticed that TfL put out a press release just a few weeks ago saying that you were thinking of extending the Fleet Operators Recognition Scheme to motorcycle couriers. Could you just explain a little bit about the initial work you've done and what response you've had from courier firms?
So this is based on the engagement that we've already having with courier firms such as Deliveroo, City Sprint and others. So it's to develop, and we have ongoing meetings with such companies scheduled, and we want to draw those together to form a working group to help basically drive this program forward. So hopefully you're familiar with the basic concept of fleet operator recognition scheme, where people meet certain standards and then have a recognition. With the freight industry, you sort of have bronze, silver and gold, depending on the level of effort and issues that you've actually addressed. So the kinds of requirements that this might include for companies joining that kind of scheme would be that companies requiring all those who ride for them do so with a MCIA accredited training company, because we've been working with MCIA to up the standard of training, so that if the companies are steering their riders to use those accredited companies, we know they're getting good training. Promoting our training courses, particularly the beyond the CBT, so that you're going beyond the basic tests, so that you've like you're suggesting they've taken certain training. And then potentially those companies prioritising those riders who have additional training, e.g. giving them additional access to work, or maybe allowing them to work longer, specifically scheduled longer hours, or other ways that could prioritise the riders themselves. Again, trying to address those barriers. Why don't people do this? And then sharing, we'll have more of an audience, a captive audience, if you like, where we can continually to pump safety information to these people. And as we develop new products and opportunities, we'll be able to work with this wider audience. And this is exactly what we've done with the freight industry, where we've been able to really develop a collective movement where as new learnings come on board, or new technical standards, we're able to pump it out in a more effective way. So those are just some of the early thoughts. It's got to be developed in participation with those kind of companies, and it would be as part of a working group to take it forward, including some of those companies.
Okay, so it's in its embryonic stages at the moment, is that a fair comment? Okay, so what timescales do you think you're looking at? Have you got the full working group up and running yet, or? No,
it's to be formed. We'd like to get this done within the next 12 months.
The next 12 months? Mm-hmm. And you're looking then...
No, I mean, the working group will have to get it launched within 12 months, not
within
to get
12 months. Yes. Okay. And then would the working group then develop the framework? Or is work going on in the next 12 months on a possible framework?
It's develop and launch the scheme by November next year.
Okay, so the working group's going to be meeting over the next 12 months, developing the framework.
Yeah, we want to get it up and running, so this time next year it's ready to go.
Okay, lovely. And what discussions have you had with any of these guys around the table?
So as I understand it, I'm personally not leading on this work. Okay. The engagement so far has been with representatives from City Sprint, Deliveroo, Pizza Hut, the Institute of Couriers, the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport, and that we have a meeting scheduled with Papa John's in November.
Okay, fine. And who's going to determine whether a firm will be accredited? Will it be Transport for London, or will there be another group set up?
I need to, can I come, because I don't, because I think this is still in a formative stage, I don't want to give you an exact answer on that. I think that's part of the discussions with the group itself.
Okay, and have you worked out targets for business, the number of businesses you're going to...
No, I think we need to let the working group meet, and so I don't have all these answers yet, because this is a programme to be developed. But those are exactly the kinds of questions that they will need to address.
Fine. I think I'll probably better stop that line of questioning then, and we might ask further things. But can I just ask the industry, is this something that you would welcome and that...
Very much, but as Lilli has said, it's one of these things at early stages. It's a terrific development. I think what we did at the Guildhall to support TfL's launch of the schemes the other week was really a sort of launch pad for activities like this. But yes, it's early days. When it comes to the industry's role in all this, I think it's one of these things where if Lilli's going to write you with more information, we'd rather feed our answer into that same letter. So we end up with you get a fully rounded view of what's happening.
Okay, and would you see a role for your organisation in the accreditation, as perhaps been suggested?
It's potentially possible, but again, subject to discussions as the whole thing develops.
Fine.
Yeah. Sorry, I can't be more clear, but
that's fine.
It is early days. Yeah.
And Caroline, is it something that your company would welcome?
We would welcome it. We're fully supportive, and as mentioned, we are already in talks with TfL on the scheme. As regards accreditation, as I mentioned earlier, we're currently not eligible with a self-employed fleet. However, we're very keen to continue those talks and would like to be considered for accreditation at some point further down the line.
Okay, thank you. Can I just ask one other question then, is that when the Deputy Mayor for Transport was in front of us in July, she said that she was seeking to raise motorcycle safety standards by accreditation of couriers, and said that she had a letter on her desk ready to go to government. Do you know if that's been sent and what response government had?
I didn't hear the first bit of your questions. I didn't
when
know.
the Deputy Mayor for Transport was in front of us in July, she talked about a potential accreditation scheme, and that said she said that she wanted to get an increase in an improvement in the mandatory standard of training, and that she had a letter on her desk to go to government right now suggesting that they look at that.
Well, maybe at cross purposes, but obviously, as I was saying, that we have been lobbying central government about improving the compulsory basic training as part of their consultation that they've been running. And it sounds like from what you've described that that's actually relevant to that. It's the mandatory basic training. So it's not, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. David Curtin.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Now I'd like to ask a question about street design and how that affects motorcycle safety. It follows on a little bit from what we talked about at the very beginning. And particularly, TfL published something in 2016 called the Urban Motorcycle Design Handbook. You're probably all familiar with that. And in that, there were 5 main safety challenges that it talked about: grip, visibility, roadside features, traffic calming, and filtering. So I'd like first of all to ask Craig and then Anna, how effectively do you think TfL is implementing the guidance in this Urban Motorcycle Design Handbook?
We were partly involved in the development of the guidance. It drew on a number of specific things, most importantly the Institute of Highways Engineers Motorcycle Guidelines, rather than sought to rewrite the world, so to speak. There was also a useful training course for boroughs accompanying that. I think the issue is not so much how much TfL has rolled it out, because it continues to do so, but the take-up amongst the boroughs, where a lot of this much more specific activity is going to be applied on the roads. I mean, clearly that's one area where more work needs to be done, pretty much amongst the boroughs, really. I mean, Lilli, do you have anything to add about how we can try and
I think it's the kind of thing
that?
You need to... there's always a danger that you produce something and you think, oh, that was the job done. You've done but you've got to keep it front and centre of mind. And so I have design experts in my team or across the organisation, which we've now trained up, which I think are looking at and using this guidance much more effectively. But I wouldn't say, I mean, the boroughs are key to this, but we need to make sure that we're continuing to do it within our own schemes. I would say that obviously, even with quite a large investment programme for the road network, we are amending very small portions of the road network on an annual basis. And therefore, the overall user experience, if you're on a motorcycle in London, is not going to change that quickly as a result. This is about how you implement new schemes and manage the network. It doesn't address the existing network. And there, I think we need to think about maintenance regimes, survey regimes in terms of when people are looking at clutter and highway infrastructure, that they're also thinking about it in terms of replacing it with flexible bollards, those kind of things. So it's not just as part of the new schemes. And that's certainly a dialogue we're having internally, but I think, again, that's something that we really need to encourage the boroughs to do as well.
It's one of those areas where there's a huge number of shared issues between cycle users and power two-wheel users, particularly when it comes to junction design, road surfaces and things like that. And I think it's getting the boroughs to appreciate the fact that their own transport strategies, their own rollout of their interpretation of what the Mayor is proposing needs to include power two-wheelers and reducing rider vulnerability as part of that thinking. There's a huge amount of work that could potentially be done in partnership with cycle groups here, but again, it's about getting that engagement.
Thanks, Anna. Yeah.
I think actually Lilli's effectively answered, I think, what a question that I had, actually, because my feeling has been that the current design of the cycle superhighways has not necessarily taken into account what's in the urban motorcycle design guidance.
I don't think that's what I just said, though. But,
well, the thing is that I think these were being designed before this was published.
Yeah.
But it's just that I'm not convinced that some of the cycle superhighway implementation has necessarily been quite as considerate to motorcycles as it might have been. But apart from that, one of the other question I had on this was actually, are you continuing the training courses for the boroughs, or have you run the programme and it's now stopped?
So I think we've finished the first phase, but there's a need for ongoing engagement. We will be doing that. Just to be really clear, this guidance does absolutely apply to cycle schemes as well as other schemes, and that's exactly why we produced it.
I think we welcomed the existence of the design guidance. I think it's excellent. The course, my predecessor with the BMF, Graham Hay, attended one of the courses and said it's absolutely excellent. And if you can continue, if TfL can continue to keep rolling that out, then we thoroughly endorse it. No problem.
But you mentioned interesting. You mentioned cycle superhighways, and Lilli, you also mentioned flexible bollards. Are they the flexible bollards that you're talking about? Is that to do with the cycle superhighways?
No, it could just be. I mean, it could be. But it also could be as part of just normal highway infrastructure. If you think of most pedestrian islands, might well have a little thing that has the arrow on it. So it's just a general point that one of the issues that the handbook raises is, again, from a Vision Zero perspective, in terms of reducing risk, look at your highway network from in entirety and look at where you can remove risk in terms of where possible removing hard landscape features or those kind of issues, that if an accident does occur, a collision does occur, the consequences are going to be that much more grave.
Yeah. No, does anyone else want to come in, Philip or Caroline? Have you got anything to say about the...
I just wanted to say that we're also supportive of the continuation of rolling out of some of these initiatives. We're very supportive of cycle superhighways, not only for bicycles themselves, but the secondary benefit that they narrow the roads, and so there's fewer cars changing lanes, and that's helpful for motorcyclists. We also... like to actively support lobbying the boroughs to allow motorcycles access to bus lanes. We think it's very important.
I think this is for us a very crucial issue. Yeah, the uptake on boroughs. I think Brentwood or Brent.
Can I just say, sorry,
recently took it up.
I'm very sorry, Phil. We're going to do bus lanes in a second, so if we can just dig into
that. All right. Yeah.
Someone mentioned earlier it was using the cycle boxes for motorbikes. Some of the
stop lines, yes.
Yeah, and that will prevent right hooks. Is that my correct understanding of that? Possibly no.
Well, it's a. I mentioned it. It is something that needs more work done to know. It was only a suggestion. It would. The difficulty is cyclists then wanting to turn right with a bicycle on the right side. So there is an issue. It could, we're just saying it's something that really needs investigating, whether we could use an area of that have dedicated for
At the moment, the cycle box is sort of in front of the red lights, the traffic lights. In front of the cars, and they're just for cycles, they're not for motorcycles.
They are. A lot of motorcyclists use it, and wrongly.
Okay.
Just put it on this. I think it was about 13 or 14 years ago, in the early days of TfL, there was some research commission in Stratford, which we did alongside cycle groups, London Cycling Campaign, CTC, TfL funded it. It produced some very interesting and positive results, but really due to agendas moving on and various other reasons, it wasn't followed up. And if there was interest in taking that issue further and revisiting that work, then TfL have already done some baseline activity on this.
Lilli, what's your opinion of this? Motorbikes being allowed to use the cycle boxes?
Well, they currently obviously legally aren't. And that is, again, one of the issues with cycle safety that we know is about trying to segregate in space and time the interaction of cyclists from other motorised traffic. And that is the rationale behind an advanced stop box, is to give them those few seconds to clear if they need to turn right. And I do have worries about if the motorcyclists are trying to go straight on and they're on the right-hand side, how we would accommodate those movements. And therefore, there is a clear rationale as to why the advanced stop boxes exist, which I would find difficult. I'd happy to go back and look at this work that Craig's mentioned, which actually sort of sounds like it predates my being at TfL.
I think it does, yes.
That was very early.
I think the issue is, there is an overall issue of we need to look at junctions in their entirety and make sure that they work for all road users. I'm not sure generically that proposal will work, but I'm happy to look at it.
Sure. Well, thank you. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for your answer.
Right, we are getting a bit short on time now. If we can move now to Caroline Russell to bus lanes.
Yes.
Philip might want to comment on that.
I should probably declare an interest here. I ride a bike to City Hall every day, and I find sharing bus lanes with people on power two-wheelers and motorbikes very difficult. It's people go too fast. They go much faster than 20 miles an hour, and that feels very risky. So I just want to declare that before I start. But back in 2011, TfL made the first decision to allow power two-wheelers, motorbikes in bus lanes, and I understand that TfL are now trying to persuade boroughs to open up their bus lanes to motorbikes. Lilli, for you, what is the case that you make to boroughs to persuade them to open up their bus lanes for power two-wheelers? And what are the reasons that they give if they are reluctant to do so?
So, similar to the point I've just been making about separating in time and space vulnerable road users like cyclists at junctions, there have been benefits seen in allowing motorcyclists their own safe access to bus lanes where they're then not interacting with general traffic.
Is that benefits for the motorcyclists?
Yes, so taking it from that perspective, the monitoring that was done for the two trials on the motorcycles to bus lane didn't show a negative impact during that monitoring period on other
on pedestrians or
cyclists. So on that basis, and because it was seen to be advantageous to the motorcyclists and not deleterious to other road users, that was the decision. It has been widely welcomed by those groups. The problem we now face is that you have quite a patchwork of different regulations across London if you're going from one borough to the next or across your journey, and a motorcyclist therefore having to constantly check the signs to see whether it could be in, out. And so we have worked with boroughs such as Wandsworth, which had a particular issue with motorcycle KSIs, who subsequently have allowed motorcycles into their bus lanes. So it's really been on a case-by-case basis, looking at working directly with those boroughs. But of course, it is a policy within the draft MTS to encourage more boroughs to open up their bus lanes.
And have you been monitoring the collisions with cyclists or pedestrians? Certainly, when you've got motorbikes in bus lanes, if you've got people crossing a road, they might not see a motorcyclist coming up maybe quite fast in a bus lane if the other traffic is stationary.
If they're crossing,
have you seen a rise in collisions involving pedestrians either crossing roads where motorbikes are involved travelling in bus lanes, or collisions with cyclists, particularly at it tends to be at the junctions where the conflict comes with cyclists, but so I suppose that goes back to the advanced stop line argument rather than them actually being in the bus lane. But if they've been in the bus lane, then they are occupying the left-hand part of the ASL, the bike box, which is the bit that the cyclists would normally congregate in.
I'm not sure I totally follow the the landscape that you've laid out there, but I do think the basic point is, are we monitoring? We are monitoring the whole road network. I think that's a question I need to take away and just check that.
Could you? Because it would be, I mean, I just think it's really important that we, I mean, if there is no increase in collisions involving pedestrians and cyclists where motorbikes are in bus lanes, then that's fantastic. But certainly Living Streets, LCC, are really concerned about motorbikes in bus lanes and have raised with me specifically how it's compatible with the Healthy Streets initiative, where, for instance, noise is one of the factors that makes a healthy street. If you've got motorbikes in bus lanes, that's just increasing the faster, noisier traffic that is next to the people who are walking on the pavement. Yes, if you can give us those figures, that would be fantastic.
We'll have a look. I'll see what's possible.
Thank you.
Just comment on this. When it comes to the feed-in lanes at the left-hand side of a bus lane as you go towards lights in the ASL box, that is a cycle facility, not a shared use facility. And the one thing we've always discouraged and actually made quite plain is that motorcyclists shouldn't use those. The filtering element should really be on the outside. Now, this interestingly links to the ASL thing, because if ASL use was allowed, you end up with a situation where the powered two-wheeler is alongside the bicycle and therefore no threat to the bicycle on pull-away, whereas at the moment you do have them coming from behind on occasions. The speed element, that's something which needs to be addressed continually as part of overall speed management and reduction. I mean, clearly NO's going to be supporting this big disparity of speed. But in terms of commenting on the general acceptability, one of the interesting factors that came out from TfL's research back in 2011 was that user survey showed a much higher level of acceptability of motorcycles in bus lanes than the cycling groups were prepared to admit. And in fact, I remember sitting in this very room when there was an inquiry on it by a previous committee, when I had to basically ask the LCC representative who he was actually representing. There is greater acceptability than perhaps is apparent. I understand the issue of apparent threat, fear of vulnerability. We have to continue working on and improving all the time the standards of motorcycle ridership within bus lanes and elsewhere. But the fact is it does overall either not impact on vulnerability, but certainly helps to reduce vulnerability amongst powered two-wheel users, and that can only be a good thing. So it's one of those cases where rolling it out is important. The boroughs, the patchwork does need to be addressed. I have to say that a lot of that patchwork is down to some extremely strong views which are misinformed amongst certain transport committees in certain boroughs, and I do feel that whatever TfL can do to help shed a bit of more pragmatic light on this issue, whatever they can do there can only be helpful in the industry, and I'm certain the riders groups as well would support those efforts.
Would you support a 20 mph limit for those bus lanes for powered two-wheelers?
I think the speed limit should be set according to the conditions of the road at the time. It's a wider issue, but whatever was agreed, decided as being best for that road's environment, we would support.
And if the evidence, if the data that Lilli's going to helpfully look for, in terms of if there has been a shift, a change in the experience of vulnerable road users, so people walking and people who are cycling, then because of the bus lane use, then you would see that could be something that would need to be looked at again.
Everything has to be taken in the round, because don't forget there's powered two-wheeler use of vulnerability here as well. So,
yeah, of course. No,
so
I totally.
So if removing access actually increases that vulnerability, as it happened in some boroughs, then that is really a bad thing.
Yeah, I was going to say there's...
Can I say it's consistency. It's the lack of consistency currently that may lead to issues. Because depending on where you are, maybe there'll be bikes in the bus lanes, maybe there won't. And people who travel on a regular route, for instance, if you're a car driver and you're used to driving down a road where only bicycles use the bus lanes, then you may not look for motorcycles on a bit of road where they can use the bus lanes. So it's consistency. For riders themselves, it helps a lot if it's consistent. It's a bus lane, we can use it. If it was the same across London, that would be great. But it's the lack of consistency. I think the lack of consistency at the moment is actually a problem, not just for motorcyclists, but for everybody else. Because you don't know, you unless you actually know the area, you don't know what to expect.
That's good Good point.
Brilliant.
I know Philip's been dying to say something.
I've got a few points. Actually, one of them was that, and actually the weaving in and out of bus lanes. And there's quite a lot of roads that we can use a little bit of it, and then halfway down that road we can't use it, and then we're back in. It's incredibly dangerous. Yeah. And for a lot of people. And yes, I think if we were allowed to use all of them or none of them, there would be a clear rule. Preferably all of them. And the statistics were, when it was done, I can't remember the figures, but were quite phenomenal. The advantage to using the bus lanes was it was high. It was very high. So those figures definitely need to go alongside each other. But lastly, TfL are very brilliantly doing all these training schemes. Should not use of, because it isn't particularly in the tests, the use of bus lanes and things be within there, and how we interact with the cyclists and the pedestrians and the buses. It must be said as well. And then with us.
Right, I'm going to have to wrap this bit up because we've only got 5 minutes and we need to get on to collision data if we can do that. I'm sorry. Navin, was it a quick question or?
It was a quick question. 2015-16 figures show, I think, about 11 boroughs allowing motorcyclists in bus lanes. Do we have the most accurate figure, the latest? Whether it's more than 11?
I don't have an update on that. I do know that in response to the draft policy within the MTS, a number of concerns about the proposal to open it up to open up all bus lanes has received some pushback from commentators. So there is a very live debate about this.
All right, that's good. If you could have the updated data, be useful. So finally, collision data.
Thank you, Chair. My first question is, what improvements does TfL need to make to the way collision data is collected? Anna, can I start with you on that?
I'm sure most of us around this table would appreciate a lot more data about motorcycle collisions. I can't really comment on exactly how they're doing this at the moment. But what's mentioned here, use of mobile devices and integrated with collision statistics, these sounds like possible advances. I think going back to things like the sort of loss and control thing, there are still things that without some sort of awareness training or something on behalf of those for those who are actually doing this data collection, we may not pick up as rich data as we would like.
Okay.
I think it's fair to say that TfL, being in the position it's in, has been much more dynamic in terms of adapting and collecting different types of data than perhaps central government has been. It's interesting. I mean, all the stuff that's being done, we do welcome. We were having a think about this internally the other day about what else would we want to know. And there's always bits and pieces, but it's building it into an overall coherent set of data gathering and research, which is not always an easy thing to do. I suppose a bit more information about the backgrounds of the lives of the people involved in accidents so we can understand their motivations better. Now, I know some work has been done on this in the past, but that would make an interesting study, I think.
Any further points?
I did the bike safe course. Very great, very good recently. And one of the statistics that I was surprised to hear was they had figures on the amount of concentration drivers have compared to what it used to have, when something like, and I'm paraphrasing completely here, but 90% of your concentration was on driving 40 years ago or something, and it's down to 60% because now we've got mobile phones and stereos that we're changing, MP3s on and, whatever, and it's just down much further. So these statistics that they are doing on telephones and things like this are very important, I think.
Can I just clarify?
Lilli.
Yeah, so we don't actually collect the data. That's a really important distinction. It's actually the police that collect the data. We process the data. So obviously we talked a little bit about the new recording method. I think that has lots of potential benefits in terms of the move to handheld devices, albeit that's not permeated throughout the whole force yet, but it will do, and that allows...
When it will have permeated throughout the whole
I've been told that it's over the next 5-6 months,
Okay.
but at the moment it's only around 2,000, I think, are actually in use. So I think that will help. Where we can help is by making the data, once we have it, as available and as transparent as possible. So that's where we come in. So that's why we've been trying to make it available online, making it more readily available on a quarterly basis as part of our general information. And we've been doing some work with hospital episode data, which I have to say hasn't been incredibly enlightening, but we will continue to work with health institutions to see if there's some chink of light in there that really begins to unlock some of these real causes and reasons.
So are you integrating that data?
Can I just interrupt for 30 seconds?
Of course, Chair.
Thank you. I'd just like to welcome our guests from Willowbrook Primary School Academy. Hello there, how are you? They're from Waltham Forest, and we're the Transport Committee, and at the moment we're looking at motorcycle safety, and then after that we've got the Deputy Mayor for Transport coming in to talk to us. I do apologise.
Right. I was just wondering, so are you integrating the data with the hospital episode data with...
Politically, yes, we are, but not in terms of reporting, because obviously it's a statutory framework in which we report collisions and casualties, so we're not muddying it, if you like, with hospital episode data, but analytically that's exactly what we're trying to do, trying to find the where it matches and where there's gaps, because where there's the gaps, that's where we might learn something.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wants to add before we wrap it up? Anna.
I think I'd just like to say one thing, that with respect to the Mayor's transport strategy, it would help a lot, I think, in all aspects of safety if motorcycling was actually fully integrated into this transport strategy. It is not at the moment. There are a lot of good things for motorcyclists in the transport strategy. I think most of them the BMF has welcomed, and I think MAG has probably welcomed them as well. But there is one fatal flaw. Motorcycling is not a fully integrated part of that strategy.
Yeah, that's a good point. Great.
Talking about the update to the motorcycle safety strategy generally, well, we have it here. It's called the Motorcycle Safety and Transport Policy Framework. TfL, in terms of incorporating safety training accreditation, is already following parts of it, but this actually outlines the very great benefits that the Mayor would find, particularly thinking about his wider goals and his need to achieve them by the targets being set, that motorcycling can contribute to that, particularly as motorcycling decarbonises as we go forward. But certainly right now, here is a transport mode which is overlooked, and we'll continue to make the case to TfL and also to this committee.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Caroline, you want to say anything? No. Thank you very much. Philip? No? All right.
Can I just to come? Yeah. So I wouldn't want you to leave you with the thought that the MTS is unintegrated in terms of motorcyclists, because at the very heart of the MTS is the Vision Zero objective. That's what we've been talking about today. And it has the focus element in terms of how we're addressing safety, which is focusing on motorcycles. It also talks about the role in particular, and I think it's been picked up in terms of motorcycles with deliveries in future and other modes. So I do think it is considered as a full and important part of London's transport network. It has been a consultation, and we will be obviously responding to the kinds of comments that have been made and have been really constructive.
Okay, thank you. For our young guests, the MTS, which everyone keeps referring to, is the Mayor's Transport Strategy. The Mayor is now producing a new strategy for the next 25 years, and he's consulting with people in London, and you can respond if you want to, if your teachers want to help you, as to what you think are the priorities for the Mayor and for London going forward. All right, well, with that, thank you very much indeed to our guests. Thank you very much. It's been really informative, really helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, so... Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, that's brilliant. That's really
Right, so while we're waiting for our new guests, we'll just knock out a few of our procedures. So if we do third item, minutes. Do we agree to minutes? Yep. summary list of actions, I agree. Right. Oh yes, can we note the report and discussion we've just had, and can we delegate authority to myself in consultation with the Deputy Chair and Party Group leaders to agree any outputs arising from the meeting? Thank you. Seven. Yeah. Number 7, cycle infrastructure. Note the scope and terms of reference for the investigation into cycle infrastructure, as noted, and delegate authority to me and the usual suspects. 8, work programme. Can we agree the work programme for the remainder of the year?
Agreed.
Right. And we want to use the December meeting to discuss pedicabs. Is that okay with everybody? Yeah.
Do we want to add in there that you're going to write also a letter? You're going to write a letter
Yes.
about Northolt.
Yes, I've received, a number of members have received a letter in relation to Northolt being used for civil flights, and the intention is that I write to the Department of Transport and also write to the MOD to ask some of the questions that are raised in that, but I've also asked that before that letter's sent off, I circulate that to Leeds and also to you, Doctor, because you're the man on the ground. Lovely. All right, is that agreed? Thank you. Do we want to do the date of the next meeting now? Might as well. 6th of December. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
And we'll come to any of this. Good. Right, well, thank you very much indeed. We now welcome Valerie Shawcross, CBE, who is the Deputy Mayor for Transport. So if your bus doesn't turn up on time, if your train doesn't turn up, this is the lady who's responsible. But of course, when all those times it does turn up on time, and then she's also responsible.
Because of your lobbying.
We're very grateful. I know you've taken slot out of your diary, Valerie, and I'm really grateful for that. And thank you to David Hughes. David Hughes is the Director of Strategy and Service Development, London Underground and Transport for London. So thank you very much indeed. So we heard in the press that there was going to be, let's say, a stalling of the of new rolling stock that had been planned for the Northern Line and Jubilee line. And what I'd like to ask you actually is, you asked David Hughes first of all, how much money do you think the pausing of this procurement process will actually save TfL?
Yes, so thank you, Chair. The decision to pause the World Class Capacity Programme saves us £600 million across the business plan period.
Lovely, thank you. So that's pretty much the same figure then that the freezing of the fares has cost TfL. Would that be true to say that?
So the World Class Capacity Programme was accommodated in previous iterations of the TfL business plan, up to and including last year's business plan, which of course also accommodated the Mayor's policy on freeze and the phasing out of the government grant. So I think it's, if I may, a little bit simplistic just to pick two similar numbers and try and tie them together.
Just funnily, we calculate the fares free to be around about 640 million.
Chair, because I've been working on the business plan, I wonder if it'd be helpful if I came in on this one.
By all means,
Yeah. Okay. Well, the first thing to say is the tube modernisation programme does continue at a cracking pace. So, you know, the big projects like the District Line, the Circle Line, the Metropolitan and the Hammersmith Line are well underway and continuing, as are all the station improvements. As we speak this morning, the breakthrough is about to happen on the Northern Line extension, so the tunnel will be open. Because we've had a small drop-off in passenger numbers on the tube over this summer, which I think is something around 2%, it has a major impact on the business plan. The business plan, as David said, that we published last year, absorbed the loss of £770 million worth of government revenue grant, so we have no revenue grant, absorbs and manages the fare freeze, and was a five-year sustainable business plan. But the unexpected drop-off in passenger numbers on the tube is a significant issue, that softening of passenger numbers, because essentially the tube is the only part of the public transport network that makes a profit. It makes a considerable surplus, and that is used to cross-subsidise other services. There's been a national drop-off. Train use on the TOCs has dropped off, we think, about 5%. So the drop-off in London seems to be less. That could be because we've pegged the fares. We think there are a number of economic factors behind this, but it is of a concern, and that softening of demand on the tube, the softening of passenger numbers, is something we can't ignore. So there has been a process of realigning the business plan, and we will be coming to the Budget Committee in the new year with the business plan. Transport for London board tomorrow will be delegating the power to the Finance Committee of Transport for London Board just to agree the realigned business plan. So there has been that need to recognise that this trend might continue, hence the need to make some savings. I would also say that one of the things we've been striving to do with TfL is provide more for less. We are trying to run a more efficient service. That's implicit in the whole business planning process. And what we felt we needed to do by pausing this procurement is actually find another way of enhancing the timetables. So actually, we can do it. From January, the timetable enhancements that we've been planning for the Northern Line, most of them will go ahead, and we're aiming to reach for all of those timetable enhancements on the Northern Line. So we are aiming to get up to, on parts of the Northern Line, 32 trains per hour, and we will have the new timetable on the Northern Line in January. And for the Jubilee line, the intention of the purchase of the trains was to increase the peak hours from 1 to 2. So we were going to.
So we think we can still.
We were going to double the length of the peak service times on the Jubilee line, and we were still aiming to do that from May.
So we double. Sorry, if I may. So we have planned timetable improvements. The additional capacity that we are confident that we can drive out of the existing infrastructure and existing fleet without buying additional trains. Right. Now, some of those timetable enhancements will take effect next year, right. And as Val says, that will lead to a doubling of the duration of the peak service on the Northern Line in the evening peak from January of next year. And from May of next year, we will, in a similar way, double the duration of the peak service on the Jubilee line.
When you mean double the duration, I mean that's...
So at the moment, just to be sort of crystal clear...
halving the wait or doubling the time you wait?
No,
doubling
the frequency?
There's an hour when you get absolutely, completely max peak service, which is 32 trains an hour, I think.
So...
and basically, rather than having that peak service just for an hour, you actually continue the peak service for 2 hours. So you have an extended peak service of maximum train running. And that is by turning them round faster, basically.
So there's a number of, there's a number of tweaks really that we can make to the infrastructure and the signalling system, and also to the utilisation of the existing fleets on the Jubilee and Northern Line, which allow us to gain extra capacity on those lines without going ahead to purchase the trains. Not Not the same amount of extra capacity that you would get with buying 27 new trains for the 2 lines, because in general, the more trains you have, the more service you can run. But as Val's explained, faced with an investment prioritisation process that had to be undertaken in the context of this slight softening of demand in LU revenue, the right decision for LU was to focus that rolling stock investment on our ageing fleets, in particularly the Piccadilly line. Yeah. At the same time, we think we can drive out, as we've already alluded to, we can drive out additional capacity on the Jubilee and Northern Line, even without the additional trains. And it is worth bearing in mind that both the Jubilee and Northern Line have already been upgraded. These are lines that have already benefited from very substantial investment in modern signalling systems, and already, and I quite appreciate that, in the rush hours and in the morning and evening peaks, they're still very busy, but they are already running very high frequency services compared to some of our other lines.
So what numbers are we talking about then? So how many trains per hour?
So if we take the Northern Line first of all, at the very peak of the peak, so that peak hour, the peak service that we run is currently 30 trains per hour northbound on the Morden branch, which is the busiest part of the line. And then for the peak hour, again, in the both actually morning and evening, we run 24 trains per hour on the core sections of both the Charing Cross and Bank branches. In January of next year, we will extend the evening peak to 2 hours. So we'll go from that very highest frequency that we currently achieve it for 1 hour in the evening peak, we will extend that to 2 hours in the evening. Beyond that, we're looking at further enhancements, further tweaks to the system that we think will enable us to get up to 32 trains per hour in the morning peak from Morden, which is the service that we would have achieved with the new trains. What we won't achieve in the absence of new trains is quite the same service frequency in the 2 cores that we'd previously been planning. So we think we will get from the 24 trains per hour that we have in the peak on the Bank section up to 28 trains per hour. With new trains, we could have got that slightly higher to 29 or 30. So underpinning our investment prioritisation recommendations to Val and the board is the knowledge that these lines are already high-performing and relatively high-performing, high-frequency. The knowledge that we can drive out additional capacity without the additional trains, albeit not to quite the same extent as one could with additional trains, but that underlying that is the need to focus our investment on asset replacement, and in particular replacement of the Piccadilly line fleet, which is now already 44, 45 years old, and on our current timetable has another 7 or 8 years in service before it's fully replaced. So faced with that softening of revenue and the need to conduct the business planning process against that backdrop and the uncertainty which that creates, we were pretty clear in our recommendations that our priority was asset replacement. This scheme, the World Class Capacity Programme, was a very worthwhile scheme, but it was an enhancement on top of already upgraded lines.
Right. So can I just, a couple of points from that then. This 2% reduction, is that across the board or is that on particular lines?
I think this is something that we need to come back to you with at the Budget Committee in January while we do the analysis. Right. But it seems to be at this stage, and if I'm proved wrong on this later on, please forgive me. So this is very interim sort of information, Keith. It seems to be that there's been a softening of the leisure traffic. So it looks a bit like people going out less shopping, going less to restaurants, going out for leisure purposes.
So not holding you, not nailing you to the wall or whatever. Would you say this 2% therefore is outside of the peak rather than the peak dropping by 2%?
So I think it's early days in terms of this drop-off. Yeah. There's more analysis to be done. As Val says, there seems to be a bit of a hit on the discretionary off-peak. There also seems to be a bit of a hit in terms of travel within Zone 1. I think it's quite early days to really do the micro-analysis as to what's driving it. Although, as Val alluded to a few moments ago, I think it's important to recognise that this is is being observed across the rail sector in the southeast, and my understanding is actually that softening has been more acute for the train operating companies than it has been on London Underground.
Okay. I think I'll leave that there for the moment. Thank you. It's helpful. Caroline, did you want to come in on here?
I just wanted to pick up, you still haven't fully answered, David, the questions about trains per hour.
Right.
The Northern Line, you said you are going to be able to get up to 32 trains per hour on the Morden branch. By when?
So we're aiming to do that by September 19 is our date.
By September 19.
So that's 19. Not, if I may, Caroline, the timetable changes that I referred to for next year, the plans for those are pretty firm. So January 18, timetable change on the Northern Line. May of next year, the timetable change on the Jubilee. That's kind of baked in now. We're going to deliver those. The further enhancement on the Northern Line, which we think can get us to the 32 trains per hour northbound on the Morden branch, we're targeting September 19, but we haven't fully worked through the plans for that as yet.
And then you're 28 on the two central branches.
Same time frame.
Same time scale. And then
We'd be very happy to write this down for you, because at the moment it's not in the public arena, so we could put this in writing
that would
for
be
you.
great. And then the Jubilee line, because that was supposed to be going up to 36 trains per hour.
So under the full scope,
first in the whole world, any line would get that many
not
trains?
quite. The Victoria line is at 36 trains per hour, and much to our annoyance, Moscow runs some lines slightly more frequently than that, but we're almost the highest in the world.
So we're told.
Oh, so we're told.
Yeah, it's on London Transport.
I was going to say, we're watching Russia Today.
So with the additional trains, we were planning to get to 34 trains per hour, actually 34.3, but that's a technicality. I'm going to call it. We were planning to get to 34 trains per hour with the additional trains, with an aspiration that we might be able to get that to 36, but that was aspirational rather than a kind of confident commitment. We're currently running 30 trains per hour, which, although not 36, not on a par with the Victoria line or with Moscow, 30 trains per hour is a very high frequency service. In May of next year, as I've explained, we extend the duration of the very peak hour of service, and then we're looking at plans to eke that out to 31 or 32 trains per hour sometime again in the kind of 2019 timeframe. But these are plans that we are still in the early stages of developing as we reorientate our thinking in the wake of the decision to pause the train procurement. But I'd say, not a firm commitment, but the aspirations for that Jubilee line further enhancement would be the same sort of timescale as we're talking about for the Northern Line, with the aspiration to get from 30 up to 31 or 32. And we think we can do that because we know that there is still latent capacity in the digital signalling system that we've installed. And if we can exploit that latent capacity in the signalling system, if we can look to sweat the existing fleet a little bit more than we do at the moment, then there's no reason really why we shouldn't be able to eke out a bit more service from within the existing asset base.
But you've called it a pause, but is it really a pause or is it a cancellation?
So there are a number of parts of the overall programme. I guess the most high-profile piece of it was the train procurement. But that, in terms of the overall spend,
But let's focus on the train procurement. I know the other stuff's happening.
So the other stuff goes on, which is, and not all of it, parts of the other stuff we will continue with, parts of the other scope we will pause. So that's the pause. The train procurement, in effect, we cancel because you can't keep the bidders dangling. You can't say to them, thank you for your bids, we might get back to you in 1, 2, 3, we don't know quite when. So the current train procurement, we have notified the two bidders, CAF and Alstom, that procurement is cancelled. Now, there is no reason why we couldn't restart a train procurement. However, the reality is that the Jubilee and Northern Line fleets are both due to be replaced at the end of the 2030s. So the longer you leave this procurement of an additional 27 trains, then obviously the shorter the payback period, and therefore the more difficult the investment case to go and buy additional trains.
So and then in the investment papers, programme papers we've seen, it also talked about you placed contracts for radio and CCTV equipment for the additional trains. Has that also been cancelled?
I don't believe it is. I'll have to just check on that and come back to you if I may. I think what we're doing at the moment, as I said, we're still in the wake of this decision not to proceed with the train procurement. We have secured in the draft business plan a allocation of funding to carry out further works to enable us to eke out these further service enhancements. We're still going through the process line by line of working out which elements of scope we think we want to retain and which we think we no longer need to take forward. That process is still ongoing and will be, I guess, a couple of months before we've really worked that through. What we've done in the business planning process, I referred to in response to the Chair's first question, to the saving that we've secured through this decision, but we have retained 123 million to invest in this Jubilee and Northern Line project over the course of the business plan. We're still working through exactly what the best way of investing that is in order to facilitate the service enhancements.
Just to be very specific on this, you've placed separately a contract for radio and CCTV equipment. It said for the additional trains, you've cancelled those additional trains. Are you therefore going to be cancelling this?
I'll have to come back to you, Karen. I don't know. I wouldn't want to give you the wrong answer, so if I may, I'll come back to you, because there are some enhancements that were specifically required for the additional trains, but there are other enhancements that would apply to the whole fleet. Okay. And I just want to double check before I respond on that
And then
point.
in terms of penalties, if you've gone through procurement, decided not to go ahead with the trains, likewise if you do the same for this other equipment or you don't order as much, are there penalties that you're going to have to pay?
No. So we haven't. We don't believe there are any abortive costs in this programme beyond our own internal costs associated with running the train procurement. So that's kind of project staff team.
In a way, that explains why it happened so quickly, because obviously the office realised if this was going to be enacted, it needed to be done before we caused legal or financial problems.
I'll come back in a bit. I'll let others.
I've got Tom, then it'll be Tony, then it'll be Andrew. So Tom.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got Caroline asked a couple of points I was going to make, but I wanted to ask about some of the alternative ways you're going to achieve this increase, because some of them might have an impact on passengers. And I've been reading the ever-enlightening London Reconnections about this, and some of this is from there. So will you be terminating trains early and turning them round?
That's one option. As I said, we haven't fully worked through beyond the timetable improvements that are already planned in for next year. I can't give you the full scope and the full proposal for the further enhancements. We are confident that you can get more capacity. Some options for that would entail concentrating the service in the central sections, in the busiest sections of the line.
Obviously, that would have an impact for people who are living
of course,
further
inevitably, and that's all has to be taken into account.
But those are still very high frequency trains being run. I mean, we're still talking about trains every 2 or 3 minutes.
Also, I mean, again, for London Reconnections, you've got train availability, 10% spare on the Northern Line, 8% on the Jubilee line. Are you looking to squeeze that? And will that have an impact on the reliability of the trains, if they're being pushed harder, like the Central Line trains have been?
We can't allow that. We can't allow that to happen. So the kind of starting point, Mark Wilde would be absolutely clear that the first priority is safety and reliability. So you've got to take that as the base, and then look to see what you can sweat out.
But it still might be possible within...
Yeah, but it's important in terms of looking at fleet availability on those two lines. On the Northern Line, we are in a contract with Alstom for maintenance, train service maintenance on the Northern Line is a very long-term contract with Alstom. So the fleet utilisation rates on the Northern Line are not by any means the highest across the network. So we're confident you can get more availability on the Northern Line, but it would be a commercial negotiation with our supplier to achieve that. Okay. Jubilee Line's more within our own gift, really, about looking at how we do that.
All right, thank you. I've got Tony.
I was talking to a marketing whiz the other day, and he put it this way, that the tube is a mid-market product. People only use it when they really have to. If they wanted to, they would trade up to something else or trade down. I won't say which is which, but I would love to walk if I could everywhere. I'd love to cycle, but I'm probably not young enough and fit enough. I don't use mini cabs or taxis very often. I won't make any comment further on that. I do use a lot of buses, Val, be pleased to know. Price sensitivity in being serious is a very important point. I speak to a lot of Londoners who tell me that they will try and avoid the tube if they can. So I'm surprised when you sort of almost say you're surprised in the current market that you've got a bit of a dip in tube traffic. I mean, the only way you're going to increase tube traffic is if the tube's less overcrowded, if they're cleaner, or if there's something else, a reason why you would go on the tube. Have you got any thoughts to why would you go on the tube if you can make your journey to work or socially another way?
Yeah. I think the tube is a great service. It's clean, it's fast. It is rather sociable sometimes, but it's the best way of getting around London quickly. And I think what we need to do is shine some light on exactly what is going on in terms of the drop-off in numbers, and that's about real analysis. It's not a matter for speculation, I think. We do want to provide good and better customer services. So if there's anything we're doing wrong, we want to understand that. But it does seem to us that this is part of a picture of something that's happening in the UK, and it could be partly about economic uncertainties. It could also equally, there are some elements of social change, and we've talked previously about how the delivery traffic is changing in London. It's interesting to me to hear about the fact that Zone 1 is dropping off. Well, it's actually really pleasant to walk around quite a lot of Zone 1, and people have iPhones with blue blobs on it. So as well as the economic issues, there are possibly some social change factors going on. But I don't think I don't think there was anything that we did that triggered this softening of numbers.
Are you doing regular surveys, Val, that will tell you what, we're sitting here saying it's the economy, which is the excuse every business uses when things dip.
TfL does have a huge customer research department asking questions and looking at things. We also have analysts, and of course we make use of GLA economics. It's quite interesting though that I think that the tube is used as a piece of source information for the Treasury. So when they're looking at their economic projections, one of the bits of factual data that they crunch into their projections for the future of the economy is what is going on the tube in London, because it is very, very quickly responsive to changes in the economy. So if a company goes bust and a lot of people are made redundant, those turn up as tube journeys not made the next day. So it is a very sensitive, real-world indicator of what's going on in the economy.
I think I'd add that our customer satisfaction scores on London Underground have held up and remain at record highs, and you wouldn't expect me to allow the mid-market comment to pass unchallenged. It depends how you define the market. I visit other metros around the world, not frequently, occasionally, and you don't have to spend long on New York or Paris or other comparable metros to work out that ours is not a mid-market offering.
Yeah. Okay, we're a bit tight on time, and I appreciate that. Sorry, Andrew, you wanted to come in?
How many of these cuts would have taken place if the Mayor hadn't had his partial fare freeze?
This has got absolutely nothing to do with the fare freeze. This is the fare freeze was built into the 5-year business plan that we announced last year, and there was a sustainable budget for 5 years. It's been the downturn in numbers, and we will come to the budget committee and go over all of this, which has triggered our need to find some, to realign the business plan.
So you don't need more money?
We would like more passengers back on the tube.
You don't need more money?
One thing I would, I've referenced already is that the TOCs, the train operating companies, seem to have seen, where there hasn't been a fares freeze, have early indications are that over the course of this financial year, the revenue downturn has hit them more severely than London Underground. So I agree with Val. We need to do the real proper analysis as to what's driving the revenue. We need to look at the trend, but I think there is a very plausible viewpoint that says actually the revenue downturn may have been worse had we not had the fare freeze. It depends on the view you take on elasticities, and that was your colleague's point about one of the ways of generating more demand is to hold fares.
Explain that to me again. It would be worse if we had...
Well, your colleague just made the point that one of the factors in determining levels of tube ridership is price. Yeah. Basic economics suggests if you put the price up, fewer people will travel.
You've modelled that, have you?
That's a kind of... I actually did an economics degree.
It's interesting that it is. There is some sense that it's discretionary travel. So clearly, if you have to make a journey.
Have you modelled it or haven't you modelled that?
Well,
it's a simple binary question.
As I said, Chair, we will come back to the budget committee in January when we've got across all of this detail and give you as much information as we can.
Sorry. I just want to draw a line.
Chair, it's a simple question. Have you modelled that or have you not?
The request was to come and talk about the decision.
Yeah, exactly.
And why we took and that's what we were prepped to do.
Well, don't give me answers that are
and we'll come and talk
that,
about the budget and our forecasts and what we know about that in January at the budget committee. And now you've specifically asked for that, Andrew, we'll make sure we've got the answer.
At the meeting, David or Val, could you come back to answer at the budget meeting whether you've modelled the thing?
Because Londoners are fascinated to know that you don't need any more money.
We're pressed on
I'm
sorry. I don't wish to develop. I'm sorry.
If you don't need the money, why should you get government?
I think in uncertain economic times, I hope Londoners are pleased that we are holding the fares down.
Thank you very much. Just a thought, I mean, if we can go back to the reason why there has been a drop in demand for the London Underground, and you mentioned that's across the board in the UK. It's greater outside London than inside London. Now, if you look at the demographics of the UK, the largest age cohort are people born in 1947, 1948, 1949. Those people are now all 68 to 70 years old. Have you considered that large age cohort might be using the London Underground less, and that as the more older people outside London than inside London, they may be using transport outside London even less than in London? Is that a possible reason for a 2% drop in revenue in London? Is that something you've considered?
I lost the argument there. I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure.
Can I say that? Can I ask that you give a written response to that question, because I think it's a fair question, but I think you're going to have to do some figures. And we really wanted to talk about the issue today, which is about the rolling stock, and you kindly came to talk about that, and we seem to be going off the off-piste a bit here. So can I then move on to transparency?
We're not going off-piste.
Pardon?
We're not going off-piste. The reason they're cutting the rolling stock is they ain't got the finances.
Well, I think we've covered that point.
Yeah.
So
it's not off-piste. It's actually directly on piste.
Yes. So, Caroline, if you'd like
These
to go...
These cuts are down to Sadiq's.
Okay.
Or government's grant cuts.
I'm going to focus on transparency around this decision. Let's get back some orders the chair's been trying. Val, I want to go through the board papers from October, explain TfL's making very good progress on the Jubilee and Northern Line upgrades, had it as a green in the RAG rating. When and how were you made aware that these upgrades were being paused and that the trains were going to be cancelled?
We had a discussion, and this is going into the business plan, but we took a discussion to the Mayor, because obviously we see him frequently, on the progress of the business planning, the review of the business plan, and this issue was explained to him, and the Mayor consented that this seemed to be a reasonable approach, and then the intention was to take it to the board, probably because of the timescales informally, but in fact the decision got out before we were able to do that. I think it was the very next day.
I think
so, you know, I think it's because it was a rapid timetable, the board were informed informally, but I think it got to the media before it got to the board.
And the reason for that, and the reason that this decision in the whole of the business planning process specifically, I think, was made and had to be communicated quickly, was because of the particular relationship with key suppliers. So rolling stock suppliers are few in number. The two shortlisted suppliers for this contract were CAF and Alstom. They are absolutely critical suppliers to us. And our view in TfL, I'm sure correctly, was that once we were clear that this was the emerging position, we needed to communicate that to the suppliers. It would be wrong to keep them, because they're committing bid teams and time and effort in the process. So we moved quicker, which I think is a bit of a glitch in the normal system. We had to communicate to those suppliers because we are relying, we want them to bid. In fact, they are bidding for the new Piccadilly line rolling stock and for the replacement of the DLR fleet. So you need to maintain their confidence. And I think that was the particular circumstance around this that may have led to things being a little bit...
Okay, but 13th of October, at your meeting where you had a report that said everything was going fine, it was green, at that point there was no decision made or even thinking that you were going to cancel this additional rolling stock?
Without the calendar in front of me, it's a bit difficult to say. We did have a board away day where we talked about the need to realign the business plan because of the emerging data on fares, etc. So the board were aware, in general, of the need, and we've been talking about a number of different broad prioritisations. But from memory, specifically, this particular proposal wasn't surfaced at that board.
So, same as Val, I'd need to look at diaries. I think one of the issues is that the board date was the 13th, wasn't it? And there is a lead time. The papers are circulated or published a week in advance. It was all happening over that period. So
But there could have been an oral update at that meeting if things had changed.
I'd need, as Val says, I'd need to look again at the diary of what was happening day by day.
I think what this flags for me and Val, will you review what information the board receives in order that they can do their job properly? And if
absolutely.
Things like this, this is almost a gap, that's something that's slipped through.
The board meets relatively infrequently, and we had an away day, so this happened between the away day and the board. Had we had the opportunity before the media had got onto it, we would have been able to inform the board properly. But the board were already well aware that there was officer work going on to realign the business plan, to make sure that we had a sustainable business plan to take to the board for the winter meeting.
And it took,
and the modernisation programme continues. I mean, I think the core point is that the aim is to get the frequencies up to where we want them to be.
I appreciate this is just one element of it, but obviously ASLEF, I think, leaked this, and that's how the information became publicly available. In terms of notifying us as a committee, normally when there's a big decision at TfL, certainly I think the Chair and Deputy Chair, probably Group Leads, get a phone call just to brief us on it. Would that have been done if this hadn't have been leaked? Because it seems strange we hear about something significant via the media rather than
absolutely.
via normal channels.
It happened, or the leak happened almost instantly that the decision was, you know, taken really, the officer decision, and so it wasn't the way we would normally want to proceed with something like this. But having said that, I think it was the right thing to do, you know, to pause and prevent there being any money wasted on, you know, a procurement that was continuing and then had to be stalled mid-process. So I think it was more important that we saved the money, and I think it's just unfortunate. It's a big public organisation. Things do get leaked in a way that means that we haven't been able to satisfy the proper processes.
So just clarify, so the supplier was told of the decision and then almost instantly it was out there? They didn't find out from the media, I assume?
No, again, I'm sorry, I would need to look again at exact sequence of events. We were very keen to communicate to the suppliers for the reasons we've discussed, and we also then communicated it to the teams that are working on the project pretty quickly, because we wanted to stand them down as well, or reassign them to other projects as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
Right. So just one more question. It's Tom.
Thanks very much, Chair. David, what other elements of your capital programme are at risk?
I mean, that's that will none really. I'm hoping that the decision
you'll have to read the standard tonight to find out the answer to that.
You know, so in the business planning process, this was the very difficult decision for us. You know, and I don't, you know, shy away from that it's disappointing. You know, we'd always like more trains. It's disappointing not to be able to buy more trains, but we did that in order to secure the remainder of the investment programme that we, you know, our recommendation to Val and the board, which was the more important to focus on the asset replacement in particular than this enhancement, which was, as I said, an enhancement of an already upgraded line. So the deep tube upgrade programme, in particular the Piccadilly line upgrade at the front of that, the continuation of the 4 lines modernisation, the Northern Line extension, Val said, the tunnels breaking through this morning, and the major station programmes all remain in the draft business programme, plus the smaller scale enhancements such as the step-free access programme, they're all in there. This was the one that, because it was an enhancement, because it wasn't contractually committed, we felt this was the one, although, you know, regretfully, this was the one that in that prioritisation process we thought we should let go in order to secure the rest of that programme.
So there's no threat to new tube for London?
No, it's
just the
Piccadilly, Bakerloo.
Just the opposite. The purpose is to make sure we've got an aligned business plan where we can deliver those things. You know, I think you should be recognising the fact that actually the ability to make decisions like this means that you can then make positive decisions. Had we stalled, faffed around, got halfway through it, we would have ended up spending £600 million on the lowest priority modernisation programme, and it was better to make a decision and get on with it. You know, I'm really sorry that neither you nor TfL board were informed in the way or involved in the way we would have liked you to have been, but I think at the end of the day it's better that an organisation takes the right decision and gets on with it. And you know, our apologies that you weren't wrong. And you know, TfL board didn't get the email. We weren't able to ring the chair of PIC at the time, but those things would have happened normally. But you know, I think the outcome for London is actually the sensible outcome. If you're running a big business, you can't ignore a downturn in your income. You have to, you know, this is not run on wishful thinking, it's run on money. So we needed to make a decision to respond to that.
I mean, had the Bombardier contract not collapsed on the 4 lines modernisation, would we be in this position now?
Oh, well, that's a long story. It's a long time ago, way before.
I've been in this room before.
Can I ask how the capital programme is affected by the European Investment Bank putting loans to TfL on hold?
So this is the financing arrangements, and again, we can talk about this at the Budget Committee, but by and large, TfL has it has a number of different organisations who can help finance projects. I thought, in truth, we were already burrowed up to the limit on the European Investment Bank, but I'm told by my colleagues there was some negotiations going on. Sources of borrowing are not the issue, it's not a problem. More generally, the issue is the funding which supports that financing, and that's why a drop of passenger numbers is very significant, because that's the source funding for many things. You can borrow money from a variety of locations.
That's not particularly helpful. Can I ask, finally, just on a slightly different topic, but we've had this this press release from the RMT, I think, about 1,400 redundancies. Could you comment on that? Is that? Do you recognise that figure?
I don't recognise that figure, to be honest. We're in the third phase. I think we had phase 1, phase 2, and this is the autumn phase of the transformation programme, which you've been talked through, I think, at the Budget Committee. Basically, it is, merging departments within TfL, finding efficiencies. There have been quite a lot of voluntary redundancies and natural wastage savings. The consultation with the unions for this third phase started this week. Yesterday. Up until now it's been, I won't say a quiet process, but, because it has been quite stressful for people, but we've been getting through it and it's been happening. Clearly, this is a reaction against the consultation. We do need to find savings within the transformation programme. But this consultation isn't predicated around a fixed target, as I understand it. So, David, can you help with this? Because some of this is in LU area.
Some of it is, and like Val, I wouldn't recognise that 1,400 number. We launched the consultation yesterday.
Yeah.
There are various work streams across TfL. Some of them are within London Underground, some of them are in other parts of TfL. There are proposals within London Underground. There are a number of proposals affecting different areas of the business, and they are a starting point for the consultation. And that's what the process that began yesterday.
Okay, thank you. Just one more question, mate. Caroline?
Yes. I just want to pick up on the statement yesterday by Paul Maynard MP about the Silvertown Tunnel, where it has been delayed, the decision on the planning application has been delayed. It was delayed for a month, and now it was delayed yesterday for a further 6 months. And this was to enable further consideration of the effect of the scheme on air quality, including its compliance with the updated UK plan for tackling roadside nitrogen dioxide concentrations, published by the government on the 26th of July 2017. Now, if the Silvertown Tunnel proposals don't meet the planning rules, which, these constant delays to try and work out how on earth a decision can be made that deals with the air pollution compliance, why is the Mayor still backing it? Does the Mayor still back it?
The DCO, we were expecting the decision on the 10th of November.
Yeah.
And we hadn't been asked for any further information, and we still haven't been asked for any further information. We expected the decision to come, and we were very surprised. It was a bit like the previous issue we talked about. This ministerial statement went online in writing and took everybody by surprise. I think since there has been the government consultation white paper on air quality, actually it probably isn't too much of a surprise that they want to probably or possibly check some of the modelling or look in more detail at something. But I don't think there's you can have I don't think there's any expectation that this project is going to be to the detriment of air quality in the area, because there's quite a lot of strong mitigations built into the project, and although the government probably wants to check some of the modelling or do some more work, and we're waiting to hear from them as to what they want to do, I don't think the fact that they're being cautious actually leads to a conclusion that there's a problem with this application.
Except that
so you know, if they felt it was it didn't meet the planning requirements, then they could have made a decision to refuse it or to set additional conditions. But in fact, all they've asked for is more time. So I think that they are doing some more modelling to check that it complies with their new air quality statement.
Another 6 months of time.
We were disappointed.
Because I mean, what it seems to me is what they're trying to the arguments against Heathrow and against the third runway are about not having any rise in any increase in air pollution in that area, that you can't spend improvements in air quality in other parts of London on things getting a bit worse somewhere where you're doing some infrastructure. Now, it seems to me that those same arguments would apply to the Silvertown Tunnel, the arguments that the Mayor has used against Heathrow.
Chair, I think this is going beyond. Generally speaking, that the application reduced and dispersed some of the poor air quality hotspots. And we had also made changes like public transport focus, ensuring that there was a proper demand management scheme in there, which is basically the tolling. So there are a number of mitigations that we've been keen on to make sure that this piece of infrastructure is as sustainable as possible.
The bottom line, Val, we just asked you for an update, and we're not revisiting the argument of whether or not it's a good thing. So
we don't have any more information. We can let you know what the government either asks us to do or tells us they are doing. But at the moment, we are as surprised as you probably were that this had happened.
Andrew, was it a quick question?
Yes, very quick. Bearing in mind that the government takes air quality more seriously than the Mayor does on this scheme. Who will be doing the measurements of air quality and the modelling of the air quality issues after Silvertown is constructed?
Can I just contest your first point there, Andrew? Because, of course, this Mayor has just introduced the T-charge. We are cleaning up every bus in London. We have a dramatic ultra-low emissions zone programme rolling out from 2019. And all of that is being progressed in the public arena, and we're taking the legal steps. So it is happening. So there will be a falling platform of air pollution in London. The air has already started to improve and will get better over the coming years. Our expectation is the DFT will ask TfL to undertake further air quality modelling, but we don't know that yet. When they tell us what they want us to do, we can let you know.
So, okay, so if you could let us know when that happens, because obviously the DFT doesn't trust TfL's modelling, otherwise it wouldn't have put this 6-month delay in. Is that not the case? If you've already presented the case for Silvertown, because the issue is that the residents in the area are not persuaded that this won't result in a serious decline in air quality,
Andrew,
in Silvertown and indeed south of the river as well.
So this has happened post the planning inquiry. The inspector hadn't asked for any further information. The determination. We were waiting for the determination. This is not mid-process, this is post-process. So I don't think there's any, if there'd been any doubt about the evidence that had been provided, then I would have expected the planning inspectorate to ask for it mid-process, because is not normal, I don't think, for challenges to be made to the veracity of the data after the process. It's made during the process. So we were waiting for the decision. The decision has been postponed, and we'll do whatever the government needs us to do in order to help them reach a final decision.
Val, thank you very much indeed. It's been very, very kind of you to come along today. I know you take time out of your diary. Thank you, David, as well. Sorry that we took a bit of an advantage of you and asked you a few more questions other than just what you came to ask about, but it's been very informative and as always very helpful. I do appreciate.
The problem, Keith, is that if I'd have been given some notice, I might have been able to give you better answers. So my apologies.
No, to be honest, Val, a couple of the questions were things that only appeared in the press today, yesterday, and so I don't think any of us had noticed. But no, we're very grateful as always. You're always open and honest.
I do my best.
You do, and it's appreciated. So thank you very much indeed. Just to finish. The committee has recommended to note report and the discussions. That noted?
Yeah.
Any other business? No? Lovely, lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.